Hello, good evening all. So let's start. Today I am going to pick up one of the very important chapter, at the same time a little lengthy chapter, that is chapter reproduction. In the last class we have completed discussing about the endocrine system. Now in this class I am going to revise chapter reproduction in living organisms. It's a huge chapter with a very good weightage. We are expecting at least around 10 marks or so from this chapter. Okay, so focus on this chapter very well. Do learn all the diagrams of this chapter because diagrams are a very important part of this topic. So, whether asked or not asked, if a kind of reproduction has been asked, then it must be accompanied with a diagram. Okay, so diagrams, unlike the other chapters, it is not simply will not be asking separately. It is a part of the answer itself. So learn by heart all the diagrams in this chapter. So let me quickly start with this chapter. This chapter revolves around all the different types of reproduction. Reproduction simply means the ability of an organism to make its own kind during its lifetime. So every organism has the ability to make its own kind. So initial paragraphs of this chapter is dealing with um, what is reproduction, how is it happening, what are the changes, or what are the basic requirements of reproduction. So these are the things that we are seeing in the textbook. Side by side, let me open the textbook also, that we can refer to that also. The number has been changed, chapter number 7. Okay, let me come back to this one. So in the initial chapters of the paragraph of this chapter, it is explaining the meaning of reproduction. So it is starting with the basic definition, like it is the ability of an organism to produce its own kind. But when we are looking at the complexity of the living organisms, the organisms are of varied varieties of complexities. Some of the organisms are extremely complex, at the same time some of the organisms are very simple. Okay, so do read the initial paragraph of this. Do organisms create exact copies of themselves? This is a very big question. Now, how do living organisms make their own copies? So we can see that one organism gives birth to, or it gives rise to another organism. And when you are looking at the similarities between the uh, mother and the next generation, or and the young one, are extremely large, but at the same time they are not the same. Why is it happening? Because every reproduction involves cell division. Okay, so any kind of cell division can be considered as a reproduction. So from in the coming chapter paragraph, what exactly is explained is that reproduction has a very big meaning in larger organisms, but when we are coming to the basics of reproduction, it is revolving around cell division. So if one cell divides from two cells, then that means that the reproduction has happened. For example, in case of an amoeba or a paramecium or a bacteria, for these kinds of unicellular organisms, what is the meaning of reproduction? It is nothing but a cell division. But for higher organisms, one cell or two cell division cannot result in reproduction. We have already studied about another mode of reproduction, that is regeneration. In regeneration, what is happening? A large amount of cells are produced, and the cells later converts into tissues. But even that is not enough for complex living organisms like human being. In human being, we cannot reproduce by the method of, not only human being, any of the higher organisms cannot reproduce by the help of the process called regeneration. Why? Because The growth that is contributed by the process of regeneration is limited only to tissue level. A kind of tissues can be created by regeneration, but higher organisms are not working on tissues alone. Tissues join to form uh, organs, and organs joins together to form organ systems. And for example, human body is made up of 9 different organ systems. So it's a very complex system which is very difficult to replicate or to create a copy of it. Okay. But when it comes to small organisms, it becomes very simple. For a unicellular organism, cell division itself is the reproduction. For a virus, which does not even have a cell, then what is the meaning of reproduction for them? The meaning of reproduction is nothing but it is simply the DNA replication or copying of DNA. So that can be considered as a reproduction for for a virus. So the smallest unit that we can point out in case of reproduction is nothing but it is DNA replication. So why I want you to read this through this is that there are many small statements in this which can be picked up and can be as okay, this particular statement has been printed as it is from the textbook, and then there will be an addition that justify your answer or give reasons for this. So these kinds of questions are often seen in board exams. Okay, so read this paragraph, 2 3 paragraph. The content of the paragraph is simply this: that DNA copying is the basics of every reproduction. Without DNA copying, no reproduction can happen, no cell division can happen. Okay, so that is why the DNA replication is the most important activity in the process of reproduction. Now, this question, do organisms create exact copies of themselves? No, they never create exact copies of themselves. Why? There are 2 major reasons. Number one, at any kind of DNA replication, the DNA replication is not 100% accurate. DNA replication is never 100% accurate. So even in case of a vegetative reproduction, you will never get the same characters again, or the offsprings are not exactly or 100% exactly the same, even in vegetative reproduction or even in asexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, there are so much of variations. Okay, the variations are too much in sexual reproduction. But even when the so-called vegetative reproduction or asexual reproduction, where we consider that the variations are very less, still it is not 100% accurate. The reason being, DNA cannot be copied 100% accurately. Every time when the DNA replicates, it creates some or other kind of mistakes. And if these mistakes are minor mistakes or minor errors, or it gives out some changes in the characteristic of the organisms, then we call it as a variation. Now it's up to the test of the nature whether these variations are accepted in the nature or not. Okay, some variations are accepted in the nature, but some variations are not accepted in the nature. The one which are not accepted in the nature will be will be removed from the nature. Means they will be the first organism getting killed by another organism, or they will not be able to survive in the nature. So with their death, that unwanted or improper variation also stops, or it gets removed from the nature. If the variations are good, then that will propagate into the next generation. Okay, so that is how it is actually being done. So read this paragraph. There are 2 3 statements that are very often asked in the exam, like DNA replication is most important thing, or without DNA replication, reproduction cannot happen. Why is it so? What is the importance of variation? Okay, so there may be 1 or 2 statements that can be picked up from this paragraph and can be asked, justify your statement. Why is this variation very important? The basic reason is the environment is ever changing. The environment keeps on changing, and because of that, if an organism want to survive in this environment, they will have to keep on changing. The earth is continuously changing. If we are thinking that the earth is getting ruined by human activities, or if you are thinking that the human activities are destroying the earth, even without human activities, the earth was going to change. Whether it will be a good change or bad change, we don't know. But earth is continuously changing. Right? The places where there were no water, the water start flowing. The places where it was completely desert, plants start growing and converts into thick forest. The places which were under the sea may rise up as a mountain, or the places which were very well flourished may convert into a desert land. So these kinds of changes keep on happening on the face of the earth. Mhm. The examples are very lively available in front of us. For example, the scientists could get the fossils of some sea animals from Himalayas, right? Fossils of sea animals from Himalayas, right? That simply suggests that that area now, which are very tall mountains, used to be an area underwater, or somehow it has lifted up, or we can see the largest amount of petroleum deposits are now in Gulf countries, which are actually deserted areas. Now, petroleum is actually produced from a lot of biomass. That means a lot of plants and animals, right? How could such a large accumulation of biomass be there where it is completely deserted now? So probably those areas used to be one of the very well flourished areas on the face of the earth one time, but over the period of time, it got changed. In one of the last tsunami that hit the Pacific Ocean and Indonesia, has shifted the entire Indonesia by 20 centimeters. Probably many such incidents must have happened. Many of the islands in the Pacific Ocean, in the Bay of Bengal, has got submerged under the water. Earlier there was an island, but the sea level risen, and the water completely submerged the island. It happened at many places. Hmm. So there are many very tall mountain ranges under the water, and which earlier used to be visible on the upper side, but now it is not at all visible. Okay, why? Because the sea level has risen, right? So these kinds of changes keep on happening on the face of the earth, and the organism has to change accordingly. If the organisms are unable to change accordingly, they will not survive. No human has ever killed any dinosaurs, but still they couldn't survive. Even if we are bringing back dinosaurs to the face of the earth again, there is no guarantee that they will ever survive. What to talk about dinosaurs? We have tried out with cheetahs. We have brought almost 10 or 12 cheetahs all the way from Namibia and South Africa or African countries. Now all of them have died. I think uh, 3, 4 last week itself, one more died. Namibian cheetah has died in Kunon National Park. Right? They can't even survive in another environment, whereas they are surviving in the African continent very well. Right? They can't survive in India. Okay, so they are not adapted to this climatic conditions. They are not adapted to the microorganisms, which or the disease-causing organisms. They have not developed immunity against them. Right, because of that, they can't survive. So variations are important, so that they keep changing with the changes in the environment. Okay, so that will help them in adapting to the environment better. Okay, there's a word used here, niche. Niche is a place within the habitat of an organism where the organism is very well adjusted. Take for example, if I am saying that where can we find lions? We can say that because the lions are available in its habitat. What is the habitat of lion? Lion's habitat is a forest. But will you be able to find a lion anywhere in the forest? No. There may be some areas. There may be some areas where they exactly live. There may be a den or something. There may be some areas where they often roam and something like that. So that area is what we call as a niche. Okay. So a niche is a place where the organism is most adapted to. Okay, and that place you will find that organism, and the organism has adjusted to that environment very well. Okay, they can survive there better. For example, for us, what is a niche? Our own home is a niche. If you have traveled a long distance from somewhere and then reached Ahmedabad, okay, so I can say, okay, you have reached by your habitat. But once you reach home, the relief that you are getting, the comfort that you are getting, that's because you have reached your niche. Okay, yes. Now let me go to the next topic. The different types of reproduction, the modes of reproduction used by single organism, where only one organism is required. Now here it is not okay, talking about whether it is in plants or animals. In general, what are the modes of reproduction that are used by single organisms? Okay, majority of the kinds include asexual modes of reproduction. Asexual modes of reproduction there are two different types of reproduction. One is sexual mode of reproduction, and the other one is asexual mode of reproduction. When I'm talking about sexual mode of reproduction, a fusion of a male and female gamete is required. That is what we call as a sexual mode of reproduction. If a fusion of male and female gamete is not there, then that is asexual mode of reproduction. Okay. There is another concept that asexual reproduction includes only one organism and sexual reproduction includes two organisms. Please don't write this point in the difference between, because sexual reproduction is possible with only one organism also. That I will explain. I will be explaining later. Okay. Sexual reproduction can happen with only one organism or with two organisms. Okay. So we can't say whether it will be a single organism or multiple organism. Now let us see what are the major kinds of the asexual mode of reproduction. One of them is fission. Fission is one of the major kind of asexual mode of reproduction that is found in very small organisms, that is unicellular organisms. You can find this in amoeba, bacterium, paramecium, euglena, or any that kind of smaller organisms. Two examples has been taken in the textbook. One is amoeba, and the other one is this one. One another small organism which are dividing longitudinally is Lesmania. Yes, sleeping sickness organism. Lesmania. Okay. So these two organisms are taken. Why? Because of one major difference. When you are talking about an amoeba divides from one organism to another organism, but an amoeba can divide in any plane. It does not have a plane of division. So amoeba is a circular spherical organism, which with small variations in its body shape. That means it can keep on changing the body shape. Uh, then it can divide into two organism, two cells in any plane. Okay. The other example given in the textbook is Lesmania. Uh, they also divide into two. One can divide into two very easily by binary fission. But here the problem is that they cannot divide in any plane. They divide in a vertical plane only. Horizontally they can't divide. So that we can see in the textbook also. Here is the textbook. Yes, this is one of the example of an amoeba dividing into two. So whenever we are drawing the picture of amoeba, you must draw all the steps involved. Now, what are the steps given in the textbook? One is an original amoeba. In the second picture, what is shown? The nucleus of the amoeba is expanding or it is stretching, and then it is dividing into two. So at least these two pictures you may club together if you wish. The expansion and division. So this is called the karyokinesis. This is called karyokinesis or nuclear division. And then comes the cytoplasm. and the plasma membrane, they curve inside, they form a bureau and then join together. So this is called the cytokinesis or the cytoplasmic division. After the cytoplasmic division, you get two daughter cells. Okay, so the two separate things has to be shown very clearly in your diagram. One is the karyokinesis or the nuclear division, and the second one is the cytoplasmic division or cytokinesis. Okay, the same thing goes here also. Leishmania is a long organism and it always divides vertically. So practice this diagram very often. This diagram is also asked. The difference between amoeba and Leishmania is that amoeba can divide in any plane and Leishmania divides only in vertical plane. So here also the same thing happens. The first 3 or 4 pictures you can see what is being shown, the division of the nucleus. The division of the nucleus happens here. And then the division of the cytoplasm happens. Okay, so show these two properties, two phenomena separately. Okay, then comes the next major thing, that is multiple fission. Now amoeba in general shows binary fission, but amoeba at times may show multiple fission also. Amoeba may also show sexual reproduction also. So when we are studying that key amoeba is reproducing by binary fission, that is the most commonly found form of division or reproduction. But that does not mean that they can't use any other methods. As we are coming to higher organisms, the options decreases. Whereas in smaller organisms, they have multiple options of reproduction. They have a very small lifespan, and depending on the conditions and the resources available, they can choose their mode of reproduction. When they have adequate water, temperature is good, and food is available, then they go for the fastest mode of reproduction. For amoeba, the fastest mode is binary fission. But when they are not growing very fast, when the water is not available in adequate quantity, or when temperature is rising, when chemicals are there in the presence of which they can't grow, or the DNA of the bacteria amoeba has become very weak. In those conditions, they go for sexual reproduction. Okay. Sometimes they also go for multiple fission also. One another organism which is always undergoing multiple fission is Plasmodium. Plasmodium is the causative organism of malaria, and it always undergo multiple fission, where it forms a very thick covering around it, forming the cyst. And inside the cyst, the content of the plasmodium, it divides multiple times, forming very small cells, and they can burst open and can release each one as a separate organism. So this is what we call as multiple fission. So 3 examples need to be memorized here. Number 1, binary fission in any plane in amoeba. Second one is binary fission in Leishmania in vertical plane only. And third one is Plasmodium, which prefers to go for multiple fission. Okay. Then another mode of reproduction found in another small organism is fragmentation. Normally these are found in a small filament-like algae, normally found in flowing water. One of the best example for this is Spirogera. Okay, we have already studied about Spirogera. Spirogera does this kind of reproduction. Okay, Spirogera is a long filamentous algae, and this long filamentous algae undergoes division. But here, unlike uh, binary fission, fragmentation has a difference. Now, what is the difference between fragmentation? The fragmentation, the cell division does not happen. Okay, the long filament actually breaks into pieces. You must have drawn the diagram of fragmentation. one very common picture of fragmentation I am yes, here is the picture of fragmentation. Here we can find this, there is a long chain of cells, one after the other, connected end to end. When the fragmentation happens, the wall between two nearby cells, they break off. So here, as such, cell division does not happen. Cell division is a continuous process in this organism. But this is more of breaking of a filament into smaller pieces. So they are different from binary fission. It is not that one organism is dividing into two. It is fragmenting. One organism may get fragmented at multiple places together. How many places will it break? We don't know. It can happen between any two nearby cells, and each one can grow as a completely separate organism. The speciality of these kinds of organisms is that in them, the cell division happens only in one plane, and that keeps on adding up cells in one line, and that makes it long and filamentous structures. Okay, so this is what happening in fragmentation. The next one is regeneration. Regeneration normally happens in smaller organisms. Regeneration is a common characteristic of many organisms in general. Even human beings also do have the ability of regeneration. Regeneration is the ability of an organism to repair its lost parts. For example, if you fell somewhere and your skin got damaged, so after a few days you can see that it regrows. So that is regeneration. Human being can regenerate the skin, human being can regenerate liver, human being can regenerate many such body organs. Okay, bones can be regenerated. So this is a very common characteristic of all living organisms. But when it comes to small organisms like planaria or hydra, these are two examples of organisms that can reproduce by the process of regeneration. These are very simple organisms where very primitive tissue coordinations are present. The entire body is not made up of many complex organs or organ systems, but they are made up of very simple tissues. So because of that, these organisms, once broken into pieces, it can grow into a complete organism. But the difference between fragmentation and regeneration is fragmentation can be done on purpose. Purposefully, they can break into pieces so that reproduction happen. But no organism will cut themselves into pieces for doing regeneration. So this is an accidental process. This is an accidental process. Accidentally, if it is cut, yes, each part can survive. But this is not done on maturity. Okay. So planaria or hydra have their own separate methods of reproduction. For example, a planaria has got both ovaries and testicles, and they produce ovum and sperms, and they reproduce sexually. But if accidentally they have broken down into pieces, then they can grow. Okay, so that is regeneration. Okay. Apart from this, the difference between fragmentation and regeneration is a very commonly asked topic. One another difference you can add here is that in fragmentation, the cell division and tissue development does not happen, whereas in regeneration, yes, cell division and tissue development also happen. Okay, so this is the second point you can try as fragmentation. Another common method is found in many of the smaller organisms is spore formation. Spore formation is found in Thallophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, fungus. All these kinds of organisms we can find spore formation. Okay. In all these organisms, there will be a part of the body of the organism where a specialized structure will be formed. Here in this case, this is a picture of a rhizobium, sorry, rhizopus. Rhizopus is a fungus that is also called as a bread mold. And some straight upward strands are formed, and these upward strands bulges out on the upper side, which are called as a sporangium. Inside the sporangium, the spores are produced. And on maturity, these spores are removed or released outside and they can germinate. They can remain suspended in the air for a long period of time and can germinate when the next favorable conditions are available. So this is also a very effective and very common method of reproduction in many smaller organisms, spore formation. This also requires only one organism. These organisms also may have many other modes of reproduction, but spore formation is the most commonly found reproduction. When it comes to vegetative propagation, there are many methods of vegetative propagation. Let me summarize it with the help of a simple table. There can have okay, here we go. There can have many different types of this one, or we can say that one is natural methods. Okay, here. The natural methods of reproduction, and other one is artificial methods of vegetative reproduction. The entire thing that we are doing is vegetative reproduction. What is vegetative reproduction? The reproduction that is happening with the help of vegetative parts. That means root, stem, and leaf. That means it can happen either with the help of root, or it can happen with the help of stem, or it can happen with the help of leaf. Okay. Now let us see what are the major types of vegetative reproduction, and natural methods as well as artificial methods. Okay. In terms of using root, naturally there are many plants which can reproduce by root. For example, carrot is a naturally can reproduce by this thing. Radish can do this, or beetroot can do this. I'm not writing all of them. Okay, there are many such. For example, dahlia is a flowering plant which can do this. Sweet potato are roots. So these are naturally available. Whereas when it comes to artificial methods, scientists can make use of root and can go for tissue culturing. Tissue culturing, that is one method of reproduction by artificial methods. Stem, there are many underground stem, like potato is an underground stem, ginger is an underground stem, then turmeric is an underground stem. So there are many such underground stems. All the varieties of yams are underground stems. Yes, banana can, yes, the lower part of the stem it can reproduce. Okay, there are many naturally found species. When it comes to artificial methods, a stem can be used for stem cutting. We need to cut and plant it separately, or you can go for grafting. Sorry, but before that, let's go for layering. Grafting and layering, both the kinds. simple layering and air layering. And also we can go for a grafting. These are the artificial methods of reproduction. When it comes to leaf, naturally there is one plant that is bryophyllum, which can reproduce with the help of the buds which are present on the sides of their leaf. Artificially, we don't have much methods of reproduction with the help of leaf. We can go for tissue culturing itself. Okay. Now, what are these things? Stem cutting is quite simple. Stem cutting is the method in which we are actually cutting the stem of a woody plant and then growing it. Okay. So that is stem cutting. What is layering and air layering? Stem has a speciality that whenever it comes in contact with soil, it can start developing roots there. Okay, so stem normally remains in the air, but in case of some plants which are having very flexible stem like jasmine, one example of layering is in jasmine. If we are bending the stem and then bringing it down under the soil and then leaving it tip outside, after a few days you can see that the part which is completely buried in the soil, there roots develop. From there you can cut it off and can convert it into a small sapling. Air layering is another technique where you can use it in any kind of woody plants, or say for example citrus fruits. One of the very good example, citrus plants means lemon, orange, Mozambique, these kinds of plants. Okay, there we can use this technique where we are taking moist soil in a plastic cover or something and then sticking it onto the branch, and wherever the soil comes in contact with the stem develops roots there. After some days you can cut it off and then plant it in a separate seed. Grafting is normally done for plants which are not normally grown at a particular place, which are brought from faraway places, and we take the help of the root and a little part of stem of a local variety of a plant, and then we cut that plant and then stick the new plant over it. So the root and the lower part of the stem will be of a native plant, and upper part will be of an exotic variety, or a plant that has brought from far off distance. And that is one method of grafting. That means sticking one plant to another plant for easy growing. That is how we are doing grafting. So these are the two major methods of, the different methods of vegetative propagation by using vegetative part of a plant. Okay, so these are the major kinds of reproduction which are involved in. Yes, here we can see the grafting technique has been shown here. There we are taking a native plant and then sticking another exotic plant over it. It can be either a weak cut or a cut at the slide, or it can be done in different ways. Okay, this is simple layering where we are bringing the lower part of a branch down to the soil and then uh, leaving the tip above. This is simple layering. Okay, so these are the major kinds of sexual reproduction. All these things should be accompanied with diagram. Jumping over next to the sexual mode of reproduction, in plants. In plants, the sexual reproduction is the sexual organ is flower. Flower is not found on all plants. They are found only in angiospermic plants, or we can say, and the flowering plants are called angiosperms. Okay, so there we can find a typical flower should have four parts in it. One, the sepals, petals, the male part and the female part. So all the typical flowers are bisexual in nature. So here either a self-pollination can happen or a cross-pollination can happen. What is self-pollination? When the pollen grain of one plant falls on a flower on of the same plant, it can be the same flower or it can be another flower on the same plant. But if the plant is same, then we say self-pollination. In some plants, it can be done. In that case, it is considered as a sexual reproduction. Why? Because there is a fusion of a male and female gamete. So it is a sexual reproduction. But it involves only one plant. So one single parent can also um, can do sexual reproduction. Okay. But in case of cross pollination happens between two plants of similar kind, and the pollen grain from one plant falls on the stigma of another plant, and that makes it cross pollination. Once the pollen grain reaches the stigma, serious checking of the pollen grain happens, and if the pollen grain has passed the testing that whether it should be allowed to germinate or not, if the stigma allows the pollen tube to germinate, the pollen tube germinates through the style and the pollen tube grows toward the ovule, ovary. Okay. Now, when the pollen grain reaches the stigma, the pollen grain will have two nuclei in them. One is called the vegetative nuclei, and the other one is called the generative nuclei. The major function of the vegetative nuclei is making of the pollen tube, and the generative nuclei normally follows it. Maybe somewhere nearer to the ovary, the vegetative nuclei completes its work, that means making of the pollen tube, whereas the generative nuclei divides to form two male gametes. So from one pollen grain, two male gametes are formed when they are passing through the pollen tube. These two pollen tube, the male gametes, they enter the ovary. Inside the ovary, there are many cells. There are three cells towards the lower side. Sorry. Yes, there is a set of three cells towards the lower side, three on the upper side, and two at the center. Out of that, one of the male gamete fuses with the female egg cell, which is located at the lower side, and the other one fuses with the cell which is present at the center, which is called as the polar nuclei. Because one pollen grain gives two male nuclei, and these two male nuclei fuses with two different cells inside the ovary. This process is called double fertilization. What is double fertilization? Explain how does it happen? It's a very commonly asked question. What is double fertilization and how does it happen? Okay, so this is a very commonly asked question. But there is one more thing, that the cell which is situated at the center is called the polar nuclei, that already has two nuclei. Along with that two nuclei, one more nuclei from the the male gamete fuses. So it becomes three nuclei. So that is why this is also called as a triple fusion. So the fusion which is happening inside the nuclei can be considered as okay. File. Okay. Here we go. The fertilization which is happening in flowering plants includes two major things. One is the male gamete, which is coming from the pollen grain, is fusing with the egg cell. So this is the first fusion, and this results in a zygote. This process is called syngamy. The second thing what is happening is, this is the first reproduction. The second thing that is happening is the second male gamete, which is coming from the pollen grain, is fusing with the polar nuclei. Now, polar nuclei already has got two nucleus, plus one more nuclei of male gamete, and this is what we call as this gives rise to a cell called the endosperm mother cell, and this is called triple fusion. Because there are two different, one is this and other one is this, there are two different fertilization. This kind of fertilization in flowering plants are called double fertilization. Why is it called double fertilization? Because one pollen grain gives two male gametes. One of them fuses with the egg cell, forming the zygote. The other one fuses with the polar nuclei, forming the endosperm mother cell. But out of this, the first one is called syngamy, the other one is called triple fusion. So triple fusion plus syngamy is equal to double fertilization. Why is it called triple fusion? Because it already has polar nuclei, already has two nuclei, plus one more nuclei. So that makes it triple. Okay, I'm stopping it here for the day. If you have any queries, you may ask.